$9? Haley said. She looked down at the probate inventory, then across the conference table at Evan Molina. That's really what it says? The lawyer kept one finger beside the line. That's the appraised estate value after the environmental lien. Haley covered her mouth, but the laugh had already escaped. Isaiah gave a short breath through his nose and leaned back in his chair. Shannon didn't laugh. She lowered her eyes and straightened the papers in front of her, which somehow felt worse. Evan read the line again. Blue Mountain Depot, Depot Street, La Grande, Oregon. Condemned commercial structure. Appraised estate value, $9. He had worked in that building since he could carry a trash bucket without spilling it. He'd patched the roof, replaced belts on the bay heaters, cleared snow from the loading ramps, and crawled beneath buses in January when diesel had soaked through his gloves. Now the entire place was worth less than lunch. The lawyer, Martin Keene, cleared his throat. He'd handled James Molina's business papers for years. He had also attended the funeral 3 days earlier and stood near the back with both hands folded over his stomach. The low value isn't a judgment about the building, Martin said. It reflects the contamination notice attached to the property. The old underground diesel tanks were never fully cleared. Between remediation estimates, county fees, and the existing lien, the estate inventory assigns a nominal value. $9 is pretty nominal, Isaiah said. Haley laughed again. Dad couldn't make it 10? Haley, Shannon said quietly. What? I'm sorry. I'm just surprised. She wasn't sorry. Evan knew her well enough to see that. Haley got uncomfortable around grief, and when she got uncomfortable, she made someone else smaller. She'd been doing it since they were children. Martin continued reading. Shannon received the house on Alder Street, its furnishings, and the liquid accounts that remained after expenses. Isaiah received the operating assets of Molina Transit Lines, including the working buses, route agreements, freight contracts, and maintenance inventory. Haley received the downtown office building, which held 3 tenants and a street-level insurance agency. Evan received Blue Mountain Depot. There were other small items. James's watch went to Isaiah. Shannon kept the family photographs unless copies were requested. Haley received a walnut filing cabinet that had belonged to her grandfather. Evan heard all of it, but his mind stayed on the depot. He looked at Martin. Does that include the tools? Isaiah shifted in his chair. What tools? The tools in the service room, Dad's drill press, the welding cart. Those are business equipment, Isaiah said. They go with Molina Transit. The drill press was in the depot before there was a Molina Transit, and now it belongs to the company. Evan looked back at Martin. Martin turned one page. The working equipment was included in the fleet inventory. What about the apartment above Bay 3? That's part of the depot structure. So I get that? You received the real property, subject to all recorded claims and enforcement notices. Isaiah tapped the inventory with one clean fingernail. He had dressed for the meeting in a dark blue jacket and pale shirt. Evan had come directly from the depot in work pants with grease along one cuff. You get the apartment, Isaiah said, and every pigeon in the roof. Haley smiled at the table. Shannon reached toward Evan's wrist. Nobody's trying to hurt you. He moved his hand before she touched him. Martin began explaining the right to disclaim a bequest. If Evan refused the depot, it would return to the remaining estate and could be abandoned, transferred, or dealt with during probate. Martin spoke carefully, the way people did when they had bad news and billed by the hour. Evan barely heard him. His father had known about the lien. James knew every bill that came through the office. He knew the depot roof leaked above the old ticket counter. He knew Bay 2's electrical panel had been tagged. He knew the rear wall needed bracing, and the county had stopped allowing passengers inside years ago. James also knew Evan had no savings worth mentioning. So, why leave it to him? Evan looked around the table. Shannon had the house. Isaiah had the operating company. Haley had a building that collected rent each month. James had left his son $9 of condemned concrete and rust. Martin slid a form toward him. You don't have to decide today whether to accept. I accept it. Shannon raised her head. Evan. What? Think for a minute. I have. No, you haven't. You heard the word depot and stopped listening. Isaiah folded his arms. If he wants it, let him have it. Shannon looked at him. That's not helpful. It's what Dad wrote. Evan signed beside his name. The pen dragged slightly on the paper. He pressed harder and finished the last stroke. Haley watched him cap it. Congratulations? Evan pushed back his chair. $9 property owner, she said. Martin told her that was enough. Isaiah stared toward the window. Shannon said Evan's name, but he walked out before she could turn concern into another way of asking him to disappear. That happened in the spring of 2025, a few days after James Molina was buried. By then, the family had already begun telling itself that James's will was fair. The story had started much earlier, inside a bus depot that never looked important from the road. Blue Mountain Depot sat on Depot Street behind a chain-link fence with 3 wide service bays facing the tracks. In its best years, regional buses stopped there from early morning until after dark. Freight drivers used the side office. Farmers collected machine parts at the rear platform. The waiting room had brown plastic seats, 2 payphones, and a vending machine that sometimes dropped 2 candy bars instead of 1. By the last years of James's life, the passenger routes were gone. The ticket windows were covered with plywood. Most freight transfers happened from the newer yard Isaiah leased outside town. James still opened the depot office most mornings. He said the old place was useful. Evan believed his father meant the building. Later, he wasn't so sure. On a cold March morning, 2 weeks before James died, Evan stood on a ladder beneath the Bay 1 gutter. Meltwater had found a gap along the roof edge and was running down the inside wall. "Hand me the driver," he called. Michael Crawford was below him, holding the ladder with one hand. "Which one?" "1/4 inch." "You said that 5 minutes ago." "It wasn't 1/4 inch then." "I was wrong 5 minutes ago." Michael passed it up. "I want that entered in the official record." Michael had worked beside James for nearly 3 decades. He was thick through the shoulders, slow to complain, and careful with tools that didn't belong to him. His repair shop occupied the adjoining lot. A faded sign over the door read, "Crawford Tow and Repair," though half the town still called him when a bus wouldn't start. Evan removed the loose screw and leaned closer to the gutter bracket. "The wood's soft," he said. "How soft?" "I can put the driver through it." "Don't. I wasn't going to." "You always say that after I stop you." James came through the side door, carrying 3 paper cups in a cardboard tray. At 67, he still moved like a man who disliked being waited on. His gray work shirt was buttoned wrong at the bottom, and his reading glasses hung from a cord around his neck. "Coffee," he said. Michael looked at the cups. "That from the diner?" "The good machine at the gas station." "So?" "No." James set the tray on a workbench. "Did you fix my gutter?" "Your son found rotten wood." James looked up. "How much?" Evan climbed down. "Enough that the bracket won't hold. We need to replace a section of fascia." "Today?" "If you want water outside instead of inside." James handed him a cup. "Always trying to spend my money." "You have money?" "Not after raising you." It was a familiar line. Evan gave the familiar answer. "You didn't raise me. Mom did. You taught me to sweep." James smiled, but only for a second. Carol had been dead since 2003. Even after all those years, her name could quiet him. Michael took his coffee. "I'll get lumber after lunch." "No," James said. "You've got your own work. My own work can wait. It shouldn't have to." Michael glanced at Evan. Something passed between the older men, too practiced for Evan to catch. Then Michael tore the cardboard sleeve off his cup and dropped it on the bench. "Your father's been trying to fire me for 28 years, he said. "I'm getting close," James told him. The side door opened again. Isaiah entered without knocking, carrying a tablet under one arm. "We need to talk about the East Route," he said. James picked up his coffee. "Good morning to you." "Morning. The school contract wants a newer coach." "No school contracts through here anymore," James said. "You moved them to the yard. That's why I said the East Route." Isaiah brought up a spreadsheet. He wanted to trade 2 older buses and finance a newer one. James didn't like the payment. Isaiah said they were losing contracts by running equipment that looked tired. Evan went back up the ladder while they argued. This was how the family worked around James. Isaiah brought numbers. Haley brought tenants, leases, and plans for the downtown building. Shannon handled the house, appointments, and the private parts of James's life. Evan fixed whatever was dripping. Nobody had assigned those places. They had settled into them. When James married Shannon in 2006, Evan was still trying to understand how another family had entered the house without Carol's things leaving it. Shannon moved carefully at first. she asked before changing curtains. She kept Carol's blue mixing bowl in the same cabinet. Isaiah had been old enough to protect his own habits. Haley watched everyone and learned quickly which jokes earned her a place at the table. Evan wanted the house to feel normal again. That made him agreeable. He surrendered the front seat, shared his tools, moved boxes, and accepted that James attended Isaiah's games and Haley's events with the same camera he had once used for Evan. There was nothing wrong with that. Evan understood that even then. The trouble was how easily inclusion became replacement. By the time they were adults, Isaiah spoke about the bus company as if he and James had built it together. Haley called the downtown office our first property, though Carol had kept its original books at the kitchen table. Shannon introduced Evan as James's boy, and Isaiah as the one running the family business. James corrected her once. "Both boys are family," he said. Shannon had smiled. "You know what I meant?" Evan did know. That was the problem. On that March morning, Isaiah finished his argument and waited. James rubbed the side of his jaw. "Bring me the full numbers tomorrow. I have them now. Tomorrow, we're going to lose the coach. Then we lose it." Isaiah locked the tablet and walked toward the door. Before leaving, he looked up at Evan. "You done with the oil room shelves?" "Not yet. I asked last week. I've been fixing the roof. The shelves are for the working company." Evan looked down from the ladder. "Then the working company can send somebody." Isaiah's face tightened. James looked between them. "Evan will finish them," he said. Isaiah left. Evan waited until the door shut. "You could have asked what I'm already doing. I can see what you're doing. Can you?" James drank his coffee. Michael suddenly became interested in sorting loose washers. Evan climbed down again. "You pay me maintenance wages? Isaiah talks to me like I work for him. He's under pressure. So am I. You think I don't know that?" Evan wanted to say he didn't. He wanted to mention the medical bill he was paying down, the child support that went out before rent, and the truck that needed tires. He wanted his father to ask without being told. Instead, James pulled a folded envelope from his shirt pocket. "Take this to the county office," he said. "Get a receipt." Evan stared at it. "What is it? Paperwork? What kind?" "The kind they stamp." That was James. If he feared something, he reduced it to an errand. Evan put the envelope in his jacket. "You want me to fix the shelves too?" "After lunch." James turned away, but then stopped. "And don't let Isaiah make you feel temporary." Evan looked at the back of his father's gray head. Then, "Tell him I'm not." James picked up a broom and swept rainwater away from the wall. He never answered. 2 weeks later, James collapsed beside the same workbench. Michael found him first. Evan arrived while the paramedics were still inside Bay 1. Shannon stood near the open door with both hands pressed against her mouth. Isaiah was speaking into his phone, canceling routes and moving drivers. Haley hadn't arrived yet. Evan saw one of his father's boots beyond the paramedic's leg. That was the detail that stayed with him. The brown leather toe had a pale scrape from where James caught it under the office door. Evan had been telling him for months to replace those boots. Michael came out and removed his cap. Evan didn't ask. Michael's face had already told him. The funeral filled the first rows of the church with drivers, mechanics, customers, and people Evan hadn't seen since childhood. They shook his hand and said James had been proud of him. None of them explained how they knew. After the will reading, the family moved quickly. Isaiah renamed the operating side Molina Transit Lines and shifted the remaining equipment to the newer yard. Haley changed the locks at the downtown building before the probate papers were fully copied. Shannon asked Evan to come by the house for Carol's photographs, then said it might be better if he waited until she had time to sort them. Evan kept working at the depot because nobody told him to stop. For 6 weeks he repaired doors, logged fuel deliveries, and slept in the small apartment above Bay 3. It wasn't much. There was a narrow kitchen, a shower with weak pressure, and a bedroom window facing the tracks. His daughter lived with her mother and visited only when Evan could take her somewhere else. He never invited her upstairs. He told himself that would change when the estate settled. Then Isaiah arrived one Friday with 2 men and an empty flatbed. "We're taking the compressor," he said. Evan stood in the service room doorway. "Michael uses that. Michael owns a shop. This one belongs here. It belongs to the company." The men waited beside the flatbed. Evan wiped his hands on a rag. "What happens when I need it?" "You won't." Isaiah held out an envelope. Inside was Evan's final pay statement. "You're firing me?" "The depot isn't operating. I've been keeping it standing. That's not a job the company needs. Our name is on that company. My name too. Isaiah said it without raising his voice. That made it land harder. Evan looked at the two workers. Both men knew him. Neither met his eyes. You could have warned me. I'm telling you now. What about the apartment? The probate transfer isn't complete, and the insurer doesn't want residential use in a condemned structure. I live there. You stay there. Evan stepped closer. Where do you want me to go? Isaiah's mouth opened, then closed. He hadn't planned for that question. He had planned asset removal, insurance language, and payroll. Not the actual sight of his stepbrother, with nowhere else to sleep. You'll figure something out, he said. Shannon's people cleared the apartment the following week. They boxed Evan's clothes, cooking pans, and photographs. The boxes were left beside his truck under a plastic tarp. That summer, Evan slept in the truck more often than he admitted. He parked behind Michael's shop until Michael noticed, then moved around because he couldn't bear the offer that would follow. Some nights he used a truck stop. Other nights he parked near the river and woke before daylight so nobody would tap the glass. He took maintenance jobs when he could. He changed filters at a motel, repaired a fence behind a grocery store, and spent 4 days replacing damaged ceiling tiles in a medical office. The work paid enough for food, fuel, and the bills he refused to miss. The depot stayed locked. By the fall of 2026, weeds reached the lower windows. Wind had peeled part of the roofing membrane above Bay 3. Someone spray-painted a crooked silver line across the old baggage door. Evan went there one afternoon because Michael had called. A county notice was stapled to the front plywood. Michael stood beside it with his hands in his jacket pockets. How bad? Evan asked. Read it. The notice gave the owner 60 days to pay roughly $9,000 in accumulated fees tied to the contamination lien. If the balance remained unpaid, the county could begin seizure proceedings. Evan read it twice. I don't have $9,000. I know. I don't have 900. I know that too. A cold wind pushed dust along the loading apron. Across the fence, Michael's tow truck sat outside his shop with its hood open. Evan looked through a broken pane into the waiting room. The old seats were gone. Rain had stained the floor beneath the roof leak. Maybe Shannon was right, he said. Michael waited. Maybe I should have refused it. Maybe. Evan looked at him. That's all you got? You don't need me pretending it's a fine building. It's worth $9. No. Probate says it's worth $9. That's different. How? Probate doesn't have to stand here. Evan touched the county notice. The paper snapped beneath his fingers. Why did he leave me this? Michael looked toward Bay 1. He knew more about James's habits than anyone still living, but his face showed no answer. I've asked myself that, he said. And your father could be stubborn, secretive, cheap, proud, and wrong. That sounds promising. He also didn't do much by accident. Evan read the deadline one more time. 60 days. His truck held 2 blankets, a duffel bag, a coffee mug, and most of what he owned. Behind the plywood stood a condemned depot full of leaks, old diesel stains, and rooms nobody wanted. The rest of the family believed James had given Evan the one thing left over. Evan had believed it too. He pulled the county notice free, folded it, and put it in his jacket. Do you still have the side door key? He asked. Michael studied him for a moment, then reached into his pocket. Always, he said. Michael dropped the key into Evan's palm. It was newer than the keys James used to carry, cut after the county required heavier locks on the side doors. Evan rubbed his thumb along the teeth, then crossed the loading apron. The lock resisted. Michael leaned against the wall while Evan worked it back and forth. Lift the handle, he said. I know. You're pulling it down. I'm lifting now. The bolt finally moved. The smell inside hadn't changed. Wet plywood, old oil, mouse droppings, and the faint sour trace of diesel that had settled into the concrete decades ago. Evan stepped into the waiting room and found a square of late afternoon light lying across the floor. Someone had removed more than the seats. The wall clock was gone. So was the wooden bench James kept beneath the route map. The office door stood open, and the metal desk had been emptied. Even the small refrigerator was missing. Evan tried the light switch. Nothing happened. Power's off, Michael said. When? Beginning of summer. Who authorized that? I assumed you did. I didn't have access. Michael walked to the breaker panel and opened the cover. Several breakers had been removed rather than switched off. "That's helpful," he said. Evan went through the building one room at a time. He had known the depot was neglected. He hadn't understood how quickly an empty building could surrender. Water had lifted the flooring in the old office. A ceiling panel had fallen across the hallway. The men's restroom door was swollen shut. In Bay 2, a bird had built a nest above the heater vent. Bay 3 held only a broken pallet and a pile of damp cardboard. The apartment upstairs was worse. The front door had no lock because someone had removed the knob. The kitchen cabinet stood open. One cabinet door hung by its lower hinge. A round watermark showed where Evan's coffee tin used to sit. The mattress was gone. The curtain his daughter's mother had given him was gone too. Rain had come through the bedroom window and softened the baseboard. Michael stayed at the bottom of the stairs. Evan stood in the center of the bedroom. He could hear the wind tapping the loose gutter against the outer wall. He remembered the last night he'd slept there, when he still thought Isaiah was angry about work and not clearing him out for good. There was an old folding chair in the closet. Evan opened it near the window and sat. He took the county notice from his jacket. The total due was $8,942. There was a case number beneath it and a phone number for county code enforcement. The notice didn't say the building had to be repaired in 60 days. It said the fees had to be paid or brought under an approved agreement. That was different. Not good, but different. Evan took out his phone and photographed every page. Then he called the number. A recorded voice said the office had closed 12 minutes earlier. He listened through the menu and wrote down the name of the enforcement officer assigned to the case. Pamela Chen. Her extension was listed after a pause. Michael called up from below. "You planning to sleep in that chair?" Evan went downstairs. "I'm going to the county office in the morning." "Good. I need to know exactly what they'll accept." "Better. And I'm moving back in." Michael looked toward the ceiling. "There's no power. I have lanterns. There's no heat. I have blankets." "Water?" "The sink in Bay 1 ran before they shut the power off. That pump's electric." "I'll bring water." Michael nodded slowly. He wasn't trying to stop Evan. He was making him say the problems aloud. "The upstairs window doesn't close," he said. "I'll board it tonight." "What about the exterior doors?" "I'll replace the missing lock." "The roof?" "I can't fix everything tonight." "That's the first sensible thing you've said." Evan walked to Bay 1 and pulled the chain beside the overhead door. It moved 6 inches, shuddered, then stopped. Michael joined him. "Track's bent," he said. "It wasn't bent in spring." "No." Evan looked closer. Fresh scratches marked the lower roller bracket. Someone had forced the door after it was locked. Was anything stored in here? Not after Isaiah moved the equipment. Then why force it? Michael crouched and touched the scratches. Could have been somebody looking for copper. They didn't take the conduit. Maybe the door scared them off. Evan looked across the bay. A dark line of water ran from the wall near the old parts cage, crossed the concrete, and disappeared beneath a cracked section of floor. He went to the side door again and tested the lock. The bolt was solid. Whoever had forced the bay door hadn't come through that way. "Can you lend me a drill?" he asked. Michael stood. "You can borrow one." "That's what I said." "No, you said lend. I'm correcting the arrangement before you keep it for 6 years. They drove Evan's truck to a hardware store on Island Avenue. Evan bought a door lock, 2 sheets of plywood, plastic sheeting, screws, and a battery lantern. At the register, he watched the total climb past $100. He had a little over $500 in his account. The clerk asked whether he'd needed a receipt. "Yes," Evan said. He folded it carefully and put it in his wallet. Back at the depot, Michael helped board the upstairs window. They installed the lock, swept broken glass from the kitchen, and carried a camping cot up the stairs. Michael brought it from his shop without explaining why he owned one. "You sleep here often?" Evan asked. "Once." "When?" "When Lorraine told me, I snored." "How long ago?" "Long enough that I've learned not to discuss it." Michael's wife had died several years earlier. He still spoke about her in the present tense when the memory was funny. They worked until the light left the bedroom. Evan set the lantern on the floor. The clean space looked smaller, but less abandoned. Michael stood in the doorway. "I've got coffee at the shop by 6, he said. "I'll be at the county office when they open. Take the inventory." "Which inventory?" "The probate one. Make them show you how they got to $9. Evan looked at him. "You think the number's wrong?" "I think numbers belong to people. Find out who put that one there." After Michael left, Evan walked through the dark depot with the lantern. He checked every exterior door twice. At Bay 1, he stopped beside the old inspection pit. A steel plate covered most of it, though one corner had sunk where the surrounding concrete cracked. Water collected along that edge. The depot had been built for mechanics to stand beneath buses and work overhead. The pit had stopped being used when insurance rules changed. James later covered it with plate steel and stacked tires across it. The tires were gone now. Evan shone the lantern into the narrow gap. He saw black water and part of the concrete wall below. Nothing else. He put a bucket beneath the roof leak, carried his cot bedding upstairs, and lay down fully dressed. Every sound traveled through the building. Metal ticked as the temperature dropped. A freight train passed after midnight, shaking the bedroom window inside its plywood cover. Evan woke with one hand against the wall. For a few seconds, he thought he was in his truck. Then he saw the lantern on the floor and remembered the address. The next morning, the county offices opened at 8. Evan arrived at 7:45 with the probate inventory, the enforcement notice, a notebook, and the hardware store receipt tucked together in a folder. Pamela Chen met him at the counter shortly after 8. She wore a green cardigan and spoke without the impatient tone Evan expected. She took the notice, entered the case number, and studied her screen. "You're James Molina's son?" "Yes." "I'm sorry about your father." "Thank you." She clicked through several pages. "The account is still in estate transition. We received the recorded transfer last month, but the billing address wasn't updated. Where did the notices go?" "The address listed for the estate, which is—" Pamela turned the monitor slightly, though not far enough for him to read it. "The law office first. Then an Alder Street address, Shannon's house." "How many notices?" 3 before the final notice. Evan felt his jaw tighten. "I didn't receive any. I can note that." "Does it change the deadline?" "No. The fee's attached to the property, not the person receiving mail." He knew she wasn't being cruel. He still had to look down before answering. "What do I have to do to stop the seizure?" Pamela printed a page and set it between them. "The full balance resolves the fee action, but the environmental lien remains until the contamination matter is closed. You can also apply for a payment agreement. That requires an initial payment and proof that you're addressing the property conditions." "How much is the initial payment?" She pointed to the figure. $2,000. "I don't have that today." "The application can include a request for a reduced amount, but it needs documentation." "What kind?" "Income, repair estimates, insurance, ownership records, and a proposed schedule. Anything showing the property isn't simply being abandoned. I moved into it last night." Pamela looked at him over the paper. "I'm not sure the residential portion has current occupancy approval. It has a kitchen and an apartment." "That's not the same as approval, I know." She paused. "I'd focus on demonstrating active maintenance," she said. "Secure openings, stop water intrusion, remove immediate hazards, take dated photographs, keep every receipt. If you submit an agreement request before the deadline, enforcement review usually pauses while we evaluate it." "Usually?" "I can't promise the outcome, but it gives me a chance." "Yes." Evan opened the probate inventory. "Can you explain the $9 value?" Pamela read the entry. "That figure didn't come from our office. The lien did. The recorded lien is ours. The estate appraiser decided how it affected value. Can I see what the county has on the contamination?" She gave him a records request form. The file wasn't immediately available. Older environmental records had been scanned under several parcel numbers, and some original reports were stored off-site. Pamela said she could send what was digital by the end of the day. Evan filled out the request. Before leaving, he asked one more question. If the notices went to Alder Street, would someone have signed for the final one? Pamela checked. The certified notice was accepted. By who? She wrote a name on a small piece of paper and slid it across the counter. Shannon Molina. Evan folded the paper into his folder. He sat in his truck outside the county building and called her. Shannon answered on the fourth ring. "Evan, did you get a county notice about the depot?" There was a pause. Not long, but long enough. "I've received a lot of estate mail. This one was certified." "I may have. It says the county can take the depot. I assumed Martin sent it to you." "He didn't." "Well, then you should call him." "Why didn't you call me?" "I didn't know where you were staying. You have my number." Shannon let out a quiet breath. "Evan, I wasn't hiding anything from you. I didn't say you were. You sound like you think I did something. I'm asking why you signed for a notice about my property and never told me. It came to my house with estate mail. Your father left a mess of papers, and I'm still handling them. He died more than a year ago. Yes, Evan, I'm aware. He heard the hurt in her voice. Shannon knew how to place hurt between herself and any question she didn't want to answer. The deadline is 60 days, he said. What are you going to do? I'm going to apply for a payment agreement. Another pause. Is that wise? It's what I'm doing. You don't have the money to repair that place. I'll find work. And live where? At the depot. No? The word came too quickly. Evan sat straighter. Why no? Because it's condemned. Because there could be mold, wiring problems, chemicals. Because your father wouldn't want you sleeping there. He left it to me. That doesn't mean he wanted you inside it. What do you think he wanted? Shannon was silent. A truck passed through the parking lot, its tires hissing on damp pavement. I think James felt guilty, she said at last. He knew the business was going to Isaiah. He wanted you to have something with the Molina name attached, so he gave me a problem. He gave you what he could. Evan looked at the county form on the passenger seat. You got the house and the accounts. This isn't about me. Haley got the office. Please don't do this. Isaiah got the fleet. Those decisions were made by your father. And I got the place all of you stripped. Nobody stripped it. The desk is gone. The refrigerator is gone. Half the breakers are gone. I don't know anything about breakers. Who cleared the apartment? I paid people to box your belongings because the insurer said nobody could stay there. I was trying to protect you. Where are the boxes? Some were left with you. Some? I'd have to check the garage. Evan closed his eyes. Shannon softened her voice. Listen to me. Let the county take it if that's what has to happen. Or sign it back to the estate. I can speak with Martin about giving you a small monthly amount. It won't be much, but it'll help you get settled. How much? I don't know yet. You've thought about it. I'm thinking about it now. No, you're not. Evan, I need to go. He ended the call before she could say his name again. At the depot, Michael had opened his shop and moved an old pickup onto the lift. Evan found him beneath it, loosening an exhaust bracket. How'd the county go? Michael asked. They'll consider payments if I show I'm repairing the place. That's something. $2,000 up front unless they approve less. That's less something. Evan handed him the paper with Shannon's signature information. Michael read it and gave it back. She says she assumed the lawyer sent the notice. Maybe she did. She offered to pay me monthly if I signed the depot back. Michael lowered his wrench. How much? She wouldn't say. That sounds generous. You don't believe her? I believe she wants the estate closed. Why? People don't like unfinished business. That isn't an answer. It's the only one I have. Evan leaned against the workbench. Did Dad ever talk to you about the depot after he died? Michael looked at him. Before he died, Evan corrected. Not directly. What does that mean? It means James talked around things. Like what? Michael set down the wrench. In 2020, he told me he'd make sure I could stop working when my knees gave out. Said he was putting something together. A pension, a payment, I don't know. He never showed me paper. Did you ask after the funeral? I asked Isaiah. And he said there was nothing in the company books. Evan knew Michael's shop was busy, but busy didn't mean safe. The towing business depended on access beside the depot. If the county seized the property and closed the shared drive, Michael would have trouble getting larger vehicles to his rear doors. So you need this place open too, Evan said. Michael looked back at the truck above him. I need the access. I also want your father to have meant what he said. That was the first time Michael admitted it plainly. Evan nodded toward the depot. Help me make the county believe I'm serious. They spent the afternoon taking photographs and listing repairs. The worst active problem was the water crossing Bay 1. It seemed to be coming from two places, the roof edge and a supply line behind the parts cage. Michael shut the old valve, but the floor stayed wet. They moved the empty cage away from the wall. Its feet scraped through a layer of dirt and exposed a patched strip of concrete. Evans swept it clean. The patch was darker than the surrounding floor and ran toward the covered inspection pit. One edge had cracked and dropped slightly. Old plumbing repair? Evan asked. Michael knelt. Could be. You remember it? I remember James closing the pit. I don't remember this patch. Evan fetched a pry bar and pressed the tip into the crack. Water rose around the metal. Don't start breaking floor until we know where the line runs, Michael said. I'm checking whether it moves. It's concrete. A small piece lifted loose. Beneath it, the fill looked darker and softer than it should have. Evan tapped the floor with the pry bar. The sound was flat near the wall. 6 inches closer to the pit, it changed. He struck it again. The concrete answered with a shallow, hollow knock. Michael took the bar from him and tapped 3 spots. 2 sounded solid. The third gave the same empty note. They looked at each other. "Old void," Michael said. "Under a patch you don't remember." "I said I don't remember it. That's different." Evan crouched and wiped dirty water from the cracked edge. Something narrow and rust-colored showed beneath the concrete, then disappeared into the darkness under the slab. He didn't pull at it. Instead, he took out his phone and photographed the crack, the patch, and the exact place where the sound changed. Then he opened his notebook and wrote down the time. He added the measurements, then drew a rough square around the patch. Michael watched him. "You making evidence?" "I'm making a record." "For who?" "I don't know yet. They left the concrete alone and worked on things the county could see." Michael straightened the bent Bay 1 track while Evan replaced the lower roller. They secured the baggage door with a steel hasp, cleared wet cardboard from Bay 3, and stretched plastic beneath the worst roof opening. At 5:30, Evan photographed the work from the same angles he'd used that morning. His phone showed an email from Pamela Chen. The county had found part of the environmental file. Evan opened the first attachment on the hood of Michael's tow truck. The report was dated years earlier and carried the name of an engineering company that no longer operated. Most of it dealt with 2 diesel tanks removed from behind the depot. Soil samples had shown contamination near 1 tank. More testing was recommended, but the file had no final cleanup report. The last page held a county note. "Corrective action incomplete. Closeout pending." Michael read over Evan's shoulder. "So they pulled the tanks," Evan said. "Looks that way. But the lien stayed because nobody finished the testing. Or nobody filed it." Evan opened the second attachment. It was a letter sent to James several years before his death. The county had asked for updated soil samples and a monitoring plan. At the bottom, James had written by hand, "Spoke to office. Bayside not included. Need original map." The words were visible because someone had scanned James's returned copy into the file. "What does Bayside mean?" Evan asked. Michael took the phone closer. "Could mean the building side of the property." "Why wasn't it included?" "In what?" "The testing." Michael enlarged the image. "I don't know." Evan opened the old site diagram. 2 circles marked the former tanks behind the depot. Sample locations ran along the rear fence. None were near the service bays. The lien was real. The unpaid fees were real. But the report didn't say the entire property was poisoned. It said unfinished. That should have made Evan feel better. It didn't. The county had attached a list of current requirements. New sampling had to be performed by a qualified environmental consultant. If contamination remained above state limits, the owner would need an approved cleanup plan. Until then, the lien stayed attached. Evan called Pamela before her office closed. "Does this mean I need environmental testing before you'll consider payments?" "No," she said. "The fee agreement and contamination case are related, but separate. Active cooperation helps your application. How much does testing cost? That depends on the consultant and number of samples. Can the county do it? No. Do you have a list? I can send one." He looked at Michael. "Could it be thousands?" "Yes," Pamela said. "I don't want to mislead you. So even if I pay the back fees, I still have to pay someone to tell me whether I can keep the place. The property is already yours until the county takes it." Pamela was quiet for a moment. "Submit the payment application," she said. "Don't wait for every answer." After the call, Evan wrote environmental consultant beneath the other items in his notebook. Michael closed the hood of the tow truck. "One thing at a time. I have 60 days. You had 60 yesterday. Now I have testing too. You had that yesterday. You just didn't know. That's not better. No, it's just accurate." They returned to Bay 1. The water around the cracked patch had spread since afternoon. Evan shut the building's main valve, and the flow slowed but didn't stop. Some of it was rainwater moving beneath the wall. "If it freezes under there, it'll lift more concrete," he said. Michael brought over a wet vacuum powered by an extension cord from his shop. They removed the standing water and watched the crack. A thin line appeared again. "It's coming up from below," Evan said. "Then we open enough to drain it." They marked a narrow section beside the sunken corner. Michael used a small rotary hammer, stopping every few inches. Evan lifted the broken pieces by hand. The patch was thinner than expected. Beneath it lay damp gravel mixed with black soil. Michael shut off the tool. That's not how you fill around a slab repair. How should it look? Compacted rock. This looks like somebody shoveled back whatever came out. Evan used a narrow trowel to remove the loose material. At 6 inches, the metal edge he'd seen earlier appeared again. It was rusted and curved. A pipe? He asked. Michael crouched beside him. Too wide. They cleared around it. The object was the corner of a tin box, wedged between the old inspection pit wall and the later patch. Rust had eaten through part of the lid. Evan stopped moving. Michael looked across the bay toward the doors, though nobody else was there. You ever see that before? Evan asked. No. Could it be old parts? Could be. Buried under concrete, mechanics do strange things. Did you? Not that strange. The box wouldn't lift. One side was trapped beneath a lip of concrete. They widened the opening with hand tools, careful not to strike the metal. Dark water seeped around their gloves. The box shifted, then stuck again. Michael reached into the gap. There's wire around it. For what? To hold it in place. He cut the wire with side cutters. Together, they pulled the box free. It was about the size of a work boot box and heavier than it looked. Mud ran from one corner when Evan set it on the steel plate covering the pit. The lid had once been painted green. Only a few patches remained. Michael wiped the top with a rag. No name or label appeared. You should photograph it before we open it, he said. Evan already had his phone out. He photographed the box from each side. Then he recorded where they'd found it, including the wire and the hollow beneath the patch. Michael noticed. You think Shannon put that there? No. Isaiah? No. Then why are you looking worried? Because somebody hid it. The lid had a small clasp, but no padlock. Rust held it shut. Michael sprayed the hinges and worked a flat screwdriver beneath the edge. The metal bent before the seal loosened. Easy, Evan said. You want to do it? Yes. Michael handed him the screwdriver. Evan pushed it into the gap. The lid opened with a wet tearing sound. Inside was a folded piece of oilcloth, a photograph, and a brass key. Water had reached everything. The cloth was dark at the edges, and the photograph had curled into a shallow tube. Evan picked up the key first. 2 letters and a number were stamped into its oval head. DB 98. Safety deposit box? Evan asked. Maybe. What bank uses DB? Michael took it and turned it beneath the work light. Could be initials. Evan carefully lifted the oilcloth. Inside was a piece of lined paper, folded twice. Part of it had dissolved into the fabric. The handwriting that remained was James's. Evan recognized the slanted capital letters and the way his father pressed too hard on downward strokes. Only a few lines could be read. If this has been opened, then Bay 1 has already started giving way. Below that, the paper was gone. Farther down, another fragment remained. The ground under Bay 1 remembers what people choose to forget. The final readable word sat near a torn edge. Ask D. Evan held the cloth flat with both hands. Michael read the lines twice. That sounds like him? Evan asked. The handwriting does. The words? Michael rubbed his chin. Your father wasn't usually that dramatic. He buried a box under concrete. Maybe this brought it out in him. Evan looked at the damaged section. Whatever James had written between the lines was gone. Brown water had blurred the ink into soft stains. Ask D, he said. Who's D? I don't know. DB on the key, I can read. Then D probably had a last name starting with B. Probably. Evan picked up the photograph by its least damaged corner. James stood beside a woman on open farmland. He looked young. His hair was still dark, and he wore a denim jacket Evan remembered from pictures taken before Carol died. The woman had short brown hair and held a folder against her chest. Behind them stretched a field with a fence line and a low ridge in the distance. Evan had never seen her. Michael studied the picture. Do you know where that is? Evan asked. No. Do you know her? Michael shook his head. She's familiar, but I can't place her. You worked with Dad for nearly 30 years. I didn't attend every meeting. The back of the photograph was stuck against a thin piece of ruined paper. Evan started to separate them. Don't, Michael said. It'll tear. They laid the photograph flat on a clean rag. Evan checked the box again. There was no deed, no money, and nothing that explained the key. The bottom held only muddy water and a small brass washer. Michael took off his gloves. "We need to dry that paper properly." "How?" "Not with a heater." Lorraine used to preserve old photographs for the Historical Society. She put wet paper between some kind of sheets. "Do you have them?" "No, but the records room at the library might." Evan folded the oilcloth around the letter without pressing it. He placed the key in a clean plastic parts tray and covered the photograph with another rag. Outside, a vehicle turned onto the loading apron. Michael looked through the bay window. Shannon parked beside Evan's truck. She got out carrying a leather folder. Evan closed the tin box lid and moved it beneath the workbench. He didn't know why he hid it. The choice happened before he could argue with himself. Shannon entered through the side door without knocking. Her hair was pulled back, and she wore the raincoat James had bought her the Christmas before he died. She stopped when she saw the broken floor. "What are you doing?" "Stopping a leak." "You're cutting into the foundation." It was already cracked. She looked at Michael. "Is that safe?" "No building work is safe when somebody walks in without announcing themselves," he said. Shannon ignored that. She looked around Bay 1 at the extension cords, tools, buckets, and stacked debris. "So, you really moved in?" "I told you I did. I thought you were upset." "I was. And now?" "Now I'm working." She held the folder closer. "Can we speak privately?" Michael picked up the wet vacuum hose. "I've got plenty to do next door." "You don't have to leave," Evan said. Shannon gave him a tired look. "I'm not here to fight." Michael remained beside the vacuum. "What's in the folder?" Evan asked. "A possible solution." She opened it on the workbench. A prepared transfer form sat on top. Evan's name appeared as the current owner. The estate was listed as the recipient. "There's no pressure to sign today," Shannon said. "Then why bring it today?" "Because you called me from the county office sounding frightened." "I sounded angry." "You've always used anger when you're frightened." Evan looked at the next page. It described a monthly payment for 1 year, $500 a month, ending if he interfered with demolition, sale, remediation, or transfer of the depot. "You already had this prepared," he said. "Martin's office drafted it." "When?" "I asked about options after the notice came." "The notice you didn't send me." "I've apologized for that." "No, you said you assumed someone else handled it." Shannon pressed her lips together. Evan turned another page. "Why does the estate want the depot back?" "To close everything cleanly. It's already transferred. There are still liabilities connected to it. They're mine. Some claims can reach backward into the estate. Your father's name is still on environmental records. Isaiah's company uses a shared access agreement. The longer this sits unresolved, the more expensive it can become for everyone." There it was, not fear for Evan sleeping under a bad roof. Expense for everyone. "Does Isaiah know you're offering this?" "Yes." "Haley?" "She knows we need to settle the remaining property issue." Michael leaned against the service table. $500 a month won't rent much." "This is a family discussion," Shannon said. "Then have it at home," he replied. Shannon's face changed at the word home, but only slightly. Evan closed the folder. "I'm not signing. You haven't read it. I read enough. Please take a day." "No." Her eyes moved toward the cracked floor. "What did you find under there?" Evan's hand stayed on the folder. "Water." Shannon looked at the muddy tools, then at the workbench. The tin box was hidden from where she stood, but the key remained in its plastic tray near Michael's elbow. Michael placed a rag over it. Shannon turned back to Evan. "You can't save every broken thing your father left behind." "I'm not trying to." "Then what are you doing?" Evan thought of James's handwriting and the missing lines. "Paying attention," he said. Shannon took the folder and left without saying goodbye. They waited until her vehicle turned off Depot Street. Michael lifted the rag from the key. "You lied to her?" he said. "I answered the question she asked." "That sounds like your father." Evan didn't find it comforting. They carried the box, the letter, and the photograph into Michael's locked office. Then Evan called the library and asked what records remained from local businesses operating in the late 90s. The woman who answered said they had old city directories and newspaper archives. She asked what name he was researching. Evan looked at the stamped key. "Someone with the initials DB," he said. There was a pause on the line. "Initials are difficult," the woman said. "Do you have a year?" 1998. "That helps. Come before 6 and I'll show you what we have." Evan and Michael wrapped the wet photograph in clean cotton and placed the letter between two plastic screens Michael found in a cabinet. The screens came from an air filter, but they kept the paper flat without touching the ink. The library occupied an old brick building near the courthouse. Evan had used its computers during the summer, usually to apply for jobs. He had never gone past the public desks. A woman at the information counter led them to a room downstairs. She wore a name badge that read Marcy Bell and carried 3 city directories against her chest. "These are organized by surname and business," she said. "The newspaper index is on that computer. Some older pages are scanned poorly, so use fewer search terms." Evan set the key beside the keyboard. Marcy read the stamp. DB could also be a business. "Any bank?" Michael asked. "Not one I recognize." She looked at the wrapped photograph. "Is that wet?" "We found it under a floor," Evan said. Marcy blinked. "Recently?" "This afternoon." She took them to a work table and brought out blotting paper, 2 flat pieces of glass, and a soft brush. "You don't pull wet photographs apart," she said. "You let the paper relax first." "That's what I told him," Michael said. "You told me not to use a heater. Same principle." Marcy placed the photograph between sheets and weighted the edges. The ruined paper stuck to the back began to loosen as it dried. While they waited, Evan opened the city directory for 1998. James appeared under Melina, James, and Carol, Alder Street. Blue Mountain Depot had a separate business listing. Below that were insurance offices, freight brokers, and a bookkeeping service run from a house on Cedar Street. Burke, Danielle. Accounting and payroll services. Evan pointed to the name. Michael leaned closer. "Danielle Burke. You know her?" "I know the name. You said you didn't know the woman. I still don't know if that's her. What did she do for Dad?" "Payroll, taxes, books, I suppose." "You suppose? She didn't work at the depot. James took boxes to her." "How long?" Michael searched his memory. "Years. She stopped doing our payroll after Shannon came in? Or maybe before. James hired an office manager around then." Evan turned toward him. "Why didn't you think of her when you saw DB?" "Because I haven't heard her name in 20 years. You've heard Shannon's name every day. You still forget what she says. That's by choice." They searched the newspaper index. The first results were ordinary. Danielle Burke served on the board of a community theater. She prepared tax returns through a volunteer program. Blue Mountain Depot sponsored a holiday food drive. Then Evan found a short business item from the fall of 1998. Blue Mountain Depot owner James Melina and local accountant Danielle Burke had registered a partnership called DBM Holdings. The notice gave no description of its purpose. DBM, Evan said. Michael read the item. Could be Danielle Burke Melina, or Depot Burke Melina, or 3 letters they liked. Evan searched the partnership name. 2 more notices appeared. One announced the filing. The other listed a mailing address at a rented post office box. No land appeared. No trust appeared. Nothing connected the business to Bay 1. Marcy returned to check the photograph. "The backing should separate now," she said, slowly. She used the soft brush to lift a corner. The wet paper peeled away in small pieces, revealing the back of the photograph. Several lines had been written there in blue ink. Northfield, October 1998. Beneath that was a row of 6 numbers divided into 3 pairs. At the bottom, James had written Danielle and me. Keep original below Bay 1. Evan read it without speaking. Michael moved closer. "That's not a date. The numbers? Month would be too high." "A combination?" Evan said. Marcy looked from the photograph to the brass key. She had the good sense not to ask what they were opening. Evan turned the picture over again. The open field now felt different. It wasn't simply a place where James had once stood. He had labeled it North Field, as if it belonged to some larger set of plans. "Can we copy this?" Evan asked. "Yes, but don't put it through a feeder." Marcy scanned both sides on a flatbed machine. Evan printed 3 copies. Michael placed the original between dry sheets and slid it into a rigid envelope. The directory listed Danielle at the Cedar Street address until 2004. Later records showed no residential listing. Marcy found an old theater program with a phone number, but it had been disconnected. They searched public property records through the county website. A Danielle Burke appeared as owner of a small house near the edge of town. The record had been updated the previous winter. Evan wrote down the address. Michael checked the time. It's after 7. She might still be awake. She also might call the police when 2 men arrive holding a buried photograph. I'll go alone. That'll look much safer. They stopped at Michael's shop first. The envelope containing the letter went into a dry storage cabinet. Evan put the key on a cord around his neck beneath his shirt. By the time they reached Danielle's street, rain had started. Her house stood behind 2 tall spruce trees. A porch light glowed above a red door. A small silver car was parked in the drive. Evan remained in the truck. "What do I say?" he asked. "The truth." "All of it?" "Enough that she opens the door." They walked up the path. Evan knocked. The porch light brightened. A curtain moved beside the door. Danielle opened it with the chain still attached. "Yes?" Her hair was gray now and cut near her chin. She wore glasses and held a cordless phone in one hand. Evan lifted the envelope containing the photograph. "My name is Evan Molina." Danielle's fingers tightened around the phone. He saw recognition before she spoke. "James's son," she said. "Yes." "What happened?" The question surprised him. She didn't ask why he was there. She asked what had forced him to come. "We found something beneath Bay 1. Danielle closed her eyes. Michael looked at Evan. Neither man said anything. She opened the door wider, removed the chain, and stepped back. "You'd better come in." Her front room was warm and crowded with books. A sewing basket sat beside one chair. Papers covered half the dining table, arranged in neat stacks with colored tabs. Danielle asked whether they wanted tea. Evan said no. Michael said yes, then apologized when Evan looked at him. "I've been standing in a cold shop all day," he said. Danielle put water on anyway. She didn't look at the photograph until they were seated. Then she took it from the envelope and held it by the edges. "That's me," she said. Evan studied her face and the face in the picture. The years had changed her, but the eyes were the same. "Where were you? North of town?" "At a property called North Field. That's what James called it." "Did he own it?" Danielle placed the photograph down. "Show me what else you found." Evan took the key from beneath his shirt and set it beside her hand. She read the stamp. "DB means Danielle Burke," he said. "Yes." "And 98? The year." "What does it open?" The kettle clicked off in the kitchen. Danielle rose, made the tea, and returned with 3 cups, even though Evan had refused 1. She stirred honey into her own without drinking. "Before I answer, tell me who knows you found this." "Michael." "A librarian helped dry the photograph, but she doesn't know what it means." "Your family?" "Shannon came to the depot while we were working. She saw the broken floor." "Did she see the key?" "No." Michael shifted. "She nearly did." Danielle looked at him more carefully. "You worked for James?" "Long time." "I remember your name from payroll. I remember yours from the checks. That settled something for her?" She turned to Evan. "Is the depot legally yours? The probate transfer was recorded last month." "And Isaiah has the operating company?" "Yes." "Shannon has the house and estate accounts?" "Yes." "Haley?" "The downtown office." Danielle looked down at the photograph. "James told me he was leaving the depot to you," she said. "He didn't tell me the rest of the will." "When?" "Several years ago." "Why didn't you come to the funeral?" "I did. I stood in the back." Evan remembered many faces, but not hers. "Why didn't you speak to me?" "Because James asked me not to discuss old business unless you came with the key." Evan pushed his tea away. "He's dead." "I know. You knew he buried something under my building, and you waited more than a year. I knew where he planned to secure documents. I didn't know whether he followed through. You could have asked. And told Shannon what? That her husband had a private arrangement made before their marriage. That I believed papers might be hidden under the property her stepson inherited. James was specific." Michael picked up his tea. He usually was when it made things difficult. Danielle almost smiled. Evan didn't. "What private arrangement?" She folded her hands. "In 1998, your father learned that land north of town was going to be sold quietly. It belonged to 2 brothers who wanted out of farming. James didn't have enough cash to buy it alone. The field in the picture? Yes. How much land? 64 acres. Evan waited for the number to settle. What did he want with farmland? At first, expansion. A future terminal, storage, maybe a maintenance yard. Interstate traffic was changing, and James thought freight would grow. He wanted land before prices rose. Did you buy it with him? I provided part of the down payment and handled the paperwork. We created DBM Holdings for the purchase. I was a silent partner. So you still own part of it? No. James bought out my interest several years later. Then where is it? Danielle looked at him. The land? Yes, it's still there. Who owns it? A private trust. Evan heard the refrigerator running in the kitchen. Rain tapped the front windows. Michael lowered his cup. What trust? Evan asked. Danielle pulled a yellow notepad from one of the table stacks. When the parcel was purchased, James was frightened by what had happened with an earlier business partner. The man tried to take control of the depot's accounts and nearly forced a sale. James settled it, but he stopped trusting ordinary promises after that. What does that have to do with me? You were the reason he protected the land. Evan stared at her. Danielle continued carefully. James created a private trust. The acreage went into it. You were named the sole beneficiary. No, you were. My father left me a condemned depot worth $9. He left you the place where the trust papers could be recovered. If I owned 64 acres, why didn't the will say that? Because the trust wasn't part of the probate estate. It was created before James married Shannon. It stood apart from the later company and household assets. Evan got up from the table. He walked to the window, then back. You're telling me I own land I've never heard of. I'm telling you James intended you to own it. Intended? The recorded chain should still exist, but the original documents matter. James believed originals mattered more than copies. Where are they? Danielle touched the brass key. In a fireproof safe beneath Bay 1. We found the tin box beneath Bay 1. That wasn't the safe. Evan sat again. Danielle turned the photograph over and pointed to the paired numbers. This is the combination. The key releases the second lock. Where exactly is it? The old inspection pit had a lower service recess along its east wall. James had the safe set into that recess, then poured a concrete cap above it. The tin box was placed higher, where ordinary damage or a leak might expose it first. So, the box was meant to lead to you. Yes. Why not put everything together? Because if someone found the first box by accident, they still wouldn't have the deed. James wanted the papers protected until you had the building and chose to look after it. Evan thought of the years he'd spent repairing that bay for low wages. James had watched him work above the safe and said nothing. Why didn't he just tell me? Danielle's face tightened. I can't answer that part for him. Michael set down his empty cup. If the trust is recorded, can't Evan get a copy from the county? Possibly, but there were changes in how the parcel was indexed, and DBM Holdings was dissolved after the transfer. The original trust papers show the full path. Without them, anyone challenging the arrangement could make this slow and expensive. Evan heard Shannon's offer again. $500 a month if he transferred the depot and didn't interfere with demolition or sale. Does Shannon know? James never told her in my presence. Isaiah? No. Haley? No. Does anyone besides you know? The attorney who prepared the trust died years ago. The original notary retired. There may be archived copies, but James kept the signed deed himself. Danielle slid the key toward Evan. He didn't pick it up immediately. What is the land worth? I don't know. More than it was in 1998. Maybe much more. Value isn't proof, though. And the safe is proof? If it's still sealed? Evan took the key. Danielle placed one finger on the photograph. Before you open it, you need someone independent present. Photograph every step. Don't remove papers with wet hands. Don't call your family until you know exactly what you have. You think they'll fight me? I think people behave differently when a $9 building stops looking worthless. Evan put the photograph back into its envelope. For the first time since the will reading, he wasn't wondering why James had left him the depot. He was wondering who had been counting on him to give it away. He did not sleep much that night. At 7, he called Martin Keene's office and asked for every document connected to the depot transfer. Martin returned the call while Evan was carrying damaged ceiling panels out of Bay 3. Those records were included in your probate packet, Martin said. No, I got the will, inventory, and transfer deed. I want the environmental correspondence and anything Shannon signed after Dad died. Your stepmother handled estate administration. I know, she's entitled to communicate with counsel. And I'm entitled to records about property transferred to me. Martin hesitated. Some communications may be privileged, then send what isn't. Evan, what brought this on? The county mailed 3 notices to Alder Street. Shannon signed for the last one. Nobody sent it to me. I believe she had. She says she believed you had. Martin breathed slowly into the phone. That sounds like an administrative failure. It sounds like nobody cared whether I knew. I'll review the file. I also want to know why the transfer agreement Shannon brought me says I can't interfere with demolition or sale. Another pause followed. Did you sign it? No. Then it has no effect. That wasn't my question. Martin said he would call by noon. At 11:40, an email arrived with 5 attachments. One was a letter from the county explaining that the environmental fee case would remain open after probate unless the new owner accepted responsibility. Another was a note from Isaiah, sent through Molina Transit Lines, proposing that the company take control of the depot if Evan refused it or later transferred it back. The company would assume the back fees in exchange for clear title, control of the loading apron, and permanent use of the shared access road. A third document was an unsigned demolition estimate. It had been prepared 9 days before the will reading. Evan read the date twice. Michael stood beside him in the depot office. They knew what they wanted before you signed. They knew I was getting it. Shannon would have known the will. Isaiah says he didn't. Isaiah says whatever keeps the next question away. The estimate covered removal of the waiting room, service bays, and upstairs apartment. It also included filling the inspection pit and clearing the slab for outdoor vehicle staging. Bay 1 would be gone. The 4th attachment was Martin's note from a meeting with Shannon and Isaiah. Aloud, Evan said. Michael read the line. That's a nice word. They sat in a room and decided how long it would take me to fail. They may have thought they were solving a problem. Whose? Theirs. The final attachment was a copy of the certified county notice bearing Shannon's signature. Below it, Martin had written, "Discuss options after deadline if Evan does not act." Evan called Martin again. What does that note mean? Martin didn't pretend not to understand. It means the county action could simplify the title issue. For who? For the estate and the operating company, by taking my property. The county wouldn't seize it immediately. There would be a process. That makes it better? No. Did Shannon tell you not to send me the notice? No. She said she would speak with you. Did she? I can't answer for her. You wrote that you'd discuss options after the deadline. Yes. What options? A negotiated transfer. Potential participation by Molina Transit. Possibly allowing the enforcement process to proceed. Evan gripped the phone harder. Was I part of any of those discussions? No. Why? Because you hadn't contacted us. I didn't know there was a deadline. Martin was quiet. Evan looked through the office window into Bay 1. The broken patch remained covered with a sheet of plywood. Beneath it was a clue James had placed where demolition crews would have buried it for good. Did my father ever tell you about DBM Holdings? The silence changed, not recognition, caution. I've seen the name in older estate materials, Martin said. What materials? A business schedule prepared before James married Shannon. It listed inactive or dissolved entities. Did anybody investigate it? There was nothing in the current business accounts. That isn't what I asked. No separate asset was identified. Did Shannon know the name? She may have seen it in the schedule. Isaiah? I don't know. Evan ended the call. Michael had heard enough to understand. They knew there might be old business, he said, but they didn't know what, or didn't find it. Evan put the phone in his pocket. I'm going to Alder Street. Michael reached for his jacket. You don't need to come. I know. Danielle said not to tell them. We won't tell them. Then why go? Evan gathered the printed attachments. Because I want them to tell me the truth before they know what it costs. Shannon's house still looked like James might walk out carrying a snow shovel. His pickup was gone, but the brass numbers he'd installed remained crooked beside the garage. Haley's car was at the curb. Isaiah's was in the drive. Evan knocked instead of using his old key. Shannon opened the door. What are you doing here? I need to talk to all of you. We're having lunch. I can see that. The dining table held soup, bread, and 4 place settings. Evan noticed the 4th before Shannon did. We were discussing estate paperwork, she said. You expected Martin? He couldn't come, so there was a place for him, but not me. Haley put down her spoon. Don't start like that. I didn't start this. Isaiah remained seated. What do you want? Evan laid the demolition estimate on the table. Shannon looked at the date. Isaiah didn't need to. You had that prepared before the will was read, Evan said. It was a contingency, Isaiah replied. For the building I inherited, for a condemned structure attached to my company's access. It's not attached to your company. The loading apron connects to the shared road. Our service agreement runs through the depot parcel. You moved the service operation. We still stage overflow there. We still have freight rights. You haven't used Bay 1 in months. Because it's unsafe. Then why do you need it? Isaiah pushed back his chair. Because I run a transportation company. I can't have a county seizure, a private buyer, or you blocking access whenever you get angry. I haven't blocked anything. You could. There was Isaiah's motive, plain enough that he no longer bothered softening it. Evan owning the depot meant Isaiah had to ask. Isaiah had inherited the routes, buses, contracts, and name, but not complete control of the ground they had always crossed. Evan looked at Shannon. And you? I told you, I need the estate closed. Why does my property stop that? Because the county's first notice is named James. Because the environmental case started while he was alive. Martin said claims could come back against the estate if the transfer was challenged or found incomplete. Has anyone filed a claim? No. Has the county threatened the house? No. The accounts? No. Then what are you afraid of? Shannon looked at Haley and Isaiah before answering. I'm afraid there's always one more thing, she said. One more bill James didn't explain. One more agreement nobody can find. One more person saying he promised them money. I spent more than a year answering letters and trying to prove what belonged where. I want it finished. Michael's pension promise sat between those words, though she didn't know Michael had told Evan. So you let the county deadline run, Evan said. I did not let it run. You signed for the notice. I should have called you. You should have. I was tired, Evan. So was I. I was sleeping in my truck. Shannon looked down. Haley tore a piece of bread into smaller pieces. Mom didn't make you homeless. Her people emptied my apartment. The building was condemned. They could have called me before putting my things outside. Isaiah leaned forward. This is exactly why we wanted a clean transfer. Everything becomes personal with you. It was my home. It was an office apartment above a dead bus station. To you. Haley finally looked up. What do you want us to say? The truth. We've told you. No. You told me the depot was a burden. You laughed when it was valued at $9. Then you planned to take it back as soon as I couldn't carry it. Haley's face tightened. I laughed because the number was absurd. You laughed at me. I didn't know you'd spend a year holding on to it. I didn't hold on to it. You locked me out. Shannon reached for the papers. Evan kept his hand on them. Why $500 a month? He asked. It was what I could manage, she said. From the estate. From me. Isaiah glanced at her. That part was true, and apparently not something he liked. For 1 year, Evan said. $6,000 total, less than the county fees. It was meant to help with rent. It was meant to make me sign. Yes, Shannon said. The room went still. She folded her hands on the table. Yes. I wanted you to sign. I wanted Isaiah to assume the fees and remove the building. I wanted the environmental file out of James's estate. I wanted Haley's title final, the company final, the house final. I wanted one part of my life that didn't come with another envelope. Her voice stayed quiet. I told myself you'd be better off with money each month. I told myself you didn't need another place filled with memories of your father. And I didn't call about the deadline because I knew you would fight harder if you saw it. That was the whole of it. Not a hidden fortune Shannon knew about. Not hatred she had carried for years. She wanted certainty, and Evan was the easiest uncertainty to remove. Isaiah wanted control of the access. Haley wanted the office building protected from any reopening of probate. She said so when Evan asked her directly. I have tenants, she said. I borrowed against repairs. If the estate gets dragged back into court, that affects me. So all three of you needed me to give up. We needed the depot settled, Isaiah said. You mean taken away from me? I mean handled by someone who can afford it. Evan gathered the papers. Shannon stood. What changed? He looked at her. You were sleeping in your truck 3 months ago. Now you're cutting into concrete and calling about old companies. What did you find? Isaiah turned toward him. Haley stopped tearing the bread. Evan understood then that Shannon had told them about Bay 1. They didn't know what he had. They only knew he had refused too quickly and started asking questions. Water, he said again. Isaiah gave a short, humorless laugh. You're a bad liar. Maybe. If there's estate property in that building, it belongs in probate. If I find estate property, I'll deal with it properly. That's not an answer. It's the one you're getting. Evan walked to the front door. Shannon followed him into the hall. I meant what I said about helping you. I know. You don't believe me. I believe you wanted to help me become easier for you. She stopped beside James's old coat hooks. Evan opened the door. Behind him, Isaiah said, "The shared access agreement gives the company inspection rights. Don't damage that bay any further until I've reviewed it." Evan turned back. "You don't own Bay 1? "No," Isaiah said. "But if your work threatens company access, I'll stop you." The threat wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Evan left the house and called Danielle from the truck. "We open the safe tomorrow," he said. Danielle answered before the second ring. "I'll be there at 8, she said. "Don't touch the concrete before I arrive." "I won't." "And call Nolan Cox." "Who's that?" "A title examiner. He's independent, careful, and not connected to your family's lawyer." "Will he come to the depot?" "He will if I ask." Nolan arrived the next morning in work boots and a brown coat, carrying a document case, camera, and portable scanner. He shook Evan's hand, greeted Danielle, and asked Michael to show him the exact path from the first crack to the tin box. Nobody rushed. Nolan photographed the patch, the loosened concrete, and the exposed inspection pit wall. He copied the county notice, and Evans recorded ownership transfer. Then he placed a small video camera on a tripod facing the work area. "This doesn't prove every fact," he said. "It proves what was present when I arrived and what we did next." Isaiah had not appeared. Evan's truck blocked the side entrance, and Michael parked his tow truck across the loading apron without closing the shared road. They removed the steel plate from the old pit. A smell of damp earth rose from below. Michael lowered a ladder and tested each rung. The pit was shoulder deep, with stained concrete walls and a narrow ledge along the east side. Danielle pointed from above. The recess should be beneath that ledge. Michael climbed down with a work light. Evan followed. The ledge looked solid until they cleaned away decades of grease. A straight seam ran along the wall, too regular to be a crack. "There," Danielle said. Michael tapped the concrete. The sound changed near the center. They used hand tools first. The outer cap broke away in small pieces, revealing a steel frame. Red paint remained beneath the concrete dust. Evan crouched in the pit while Michael cleared the edges. A rectangular safe door emerged from the wall. It was wider than the tin box and nearly flush with the concrete. A covered keyway sat beside a combination dial. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Nolan checked the camera, then photographed the door close enough to show scratches, rust, and the intact concrete around the frame. "Who has the key?" he asked. Evan took it from beneath his shirt. Danielle held the photograph in a clear sleeve and read the paired numbers aloud. Evan turned the dial slowly. His fingers slipped on the first attempt. "Start again," Michael said. "I know. That's why I didn't touch it." Evan cleared the lock, entered the combination, and inserted the brass key. It stopped halfway. He looked at Danielle. "Press inward while you turn," she said. "James complained about that lock the day it was installed." Evan pushed. The key turned. Something heavy released inside the door. Michael helped pull it open. The seal resisted, then separated with a dry crack. The safe held a fireproof document pouch, 2 bound ledgers, and a long envelope bearing Evan's full name. No water had reached them. Nolan asked Evan to remove each item separately. He photographed the contents in place before Evan lifted the pouch. The envelope came last. Evan recognized James's handwriting again. This time, none of it had washed away. "Open the legal documents first," Nolan said. The pouch contained an original deed dated in 1998, a trust agreement, the DBM Holdings partnership papers, and later documents showing Danielle's interest transferred to James. Nolan read at the workbench while the others waited. He checked signatures, seals, notary stamps, page numbers, and the legal description. Then he compared them against county records on his laptop. "The paper looks right for the period," he said. "The notary commission was active. I can see a recorded deed under DBM Holdings, but the older index doesn't connect cleanly to the current parcel search." "Does the trust own it?" Evan asked. "The original deed conveys the 64 acres into the James Molina Land Trust. This recorder stamp matches an entry from December of 1998. And me?" Nolan turned several pages. "You're identified as sole beneficiary. James was the original trustee. The agreement names Danielle as successor trustee for the limited purpose of confirming transfer after his death. Evan looked at her. "That's why you needed the key," he said. "Yes." "Can you take the land?" "No, I can confirm the trust and deliver control to you. I have no beneficial interest." Nolan raised a hand. "I still need to trace every later filing. An original document can be genuine and still have been replaced, amended, pledged, or conveyed." "How long?" "A few days if the county archive cooperates." Evan picked up the envelope with his name. "Can I read this?" "It's yours," Danielle said. The letter inside was short. James wrote that he had kept the North land outside the family company because companies change when families changed. The depot was the one place he trusted Evan to return to, even if returning took years. He didn't apologize for keeping the trust secret. He said he'd seen people make promises while they still had power, then leave someone else to honor them. Near the bottom, he wrote, "Michael's retirement was supposed to be handled from this if the Roots couldn't carry it. Don't make him ask twice." Evan handed the letter to Michael. Michael read that line and sat on the edge of the workbench. He remembered, he said. It was all he said. Nolan sealed the original documents in protective sleeves. Evan signed a receipt allowing him to examine them, but not record or transfer anything without written approval. For 4 days, Evan waited. He kept working on the depot. Danielle filed her acceptance as successor trustee. Michael repaired the Bay 1 door so it could close properly. Evan submitted the county payment application with photographs, receipts, and a written request for a reduced initial payment. On the 5th morning, Nolan returned. He spread a chain of title report across the old office desk. "The trust stands," he said. Evan remained standing. "You're sure?" "The 1998 deed was recorded. DBM Holdings acquired the parcel properly. Danielle's partnership interest was released before the trust transfer became final. No later deed removed the land from the trust. There's no mortgage, tax foreclosure, or competing beneficiary. What about probate? The acreage never entered your father's probate estate. It predates his marriage to Shannon and remained trust property. The original papers explain an indexing gap that made ordinary searches difficult. Can Isaiah claim it through Molina Transit? No recorded right gives Molina Transit ownership of these 64 acres. Staging rights? Not on the north parcel. The shared road agreement applies here on Depot Street. Evan sat down. Nolan placed a certified copy of the report in front of him. "This is strong evidence. The original deed is stronger. Keep both secured. What's the land worth?" "I examined title. I don't value property." Danielle, seated beside Michael, spoke. "There's been freight development north of town." Nolan nodded. "A company has been contacting owners in that corridor. I saw several recent memoranda while checking adjoining parcels." "What company?" He wrote down a name and a phone number. "Speak to your own advisor before signing anything," he said. "A buyer's valuation serves the buyer." Evan called from the depot office that afternoon. Devin Acosta answered and asked for the parcel number. His voice changed after Evan read it. "We've been trying to identify the trust contact on that tract," Devin said. "For how long?" "Several months." "What do you want with it?" "We're evaluating sites near the planned Route 82 interchange. Your parcel connects 2 sections we're considering for a regional freight hub. I'm not agreeing to sell. I understand. Would you permit an inspection? Only if my title examiner reviews the access form." Devin agreed without complaint. 2 days later, he arrived in a white utility vehicle with rolled maps and a measuring wheel. Evan met him at the north field with Michael and Danielle. The photograph had been taken near the western fence. The ridge behind James was still there. So was one old gatepost, leaning toward the road. Devin walked the boundary, checked road access, drainage, utilities, and distance to the proposed interchange. He asked about soil history. Evan told him the depot had a separate contamination case and gave him no reason to connect it to this land. When they finished, Devin opened a map across the hood of his vehicle. "This parcel matters because of position," he said, "not just acreage. Without it, trucks would need a less direct approach and a second crossing." "What does that make it worth?" Evan asked. "To our project, just over $4 million. Michael looked away toward the field. Danielle stayed still. Evan thought he'd misheard. $4 million? Our current acquisition model puts it slightly above that. A formal offer would depend on environmental review, survey confirmation, and internal approval." Why didn't you find me before? The trust name appeared, but the contact trail ended. We approached adjoining owners instead. Did you approach my family? I don't discuss another owner's negotiations. That means yes. It means I don't discuss them. Devin rolled up the map. We can make an offer quickly if you want one. What if I don't sell? Then you own 64 acres beside a planned freight corridor. We would discuss access, leasing, or redesigning around you. Evan looked across the field. James had once imagined buses, freight, and a maintenance yard there. Selling would erase every immediate danger. It could also hand the choice to the first company carrying a large number. I need time, he said. Take it. Devin gave him a card. That evening, Evan locked the original deed in a secure document cabinet Nolan had arranged. He kept the certified report with him. The depot still had a county deadline. Rain still entered Bay 3. Evan still slept on a camping cot above a condemned service bay. But beneath Bay 1, his father's deed had been waiting exactly where Danielle said it would be, and now Evan could prove it. 3 days later, Devin called while Evan was replacing rotten stair treads. Do you have a sister named Haley Harper? He asked. Stepsister. She contacted our office. Evan set down the drill. What did she want? She said your family controlled several connected properties and could deliver the north parcel as part of a larger agreement. She can't. I know that now. What did she offer? She proposed acquiring your interest first, then selling the parcel to us. My interest for $150,000. Evan sat on the unfinished step. Did she say I agreed? She said you didn't understand the title position and would accept once the family handled the environmental debt. Did you tell her what the land is worth? No. I told her we deal with the recorded beneficiary. Me, you. Our legal staff also saw a new notice attached to the probate file. Someone is challenging the trust transfer. Evan stood. When? It posted this morning. Martin emailed the filing before Evan could call him. Shannon, acting through the estate, asked the probate court to determine whether the 64 acres had been properly removed from James's ownership. The filing argued that any papers recovered from the depot were after discovered estate property. It also claimed the depot transfer might be invalid because environmental obligations had not been fully disclosed when Evan accepted it. Isaiah submitted a statement saying Molina Transit Lines had long relied on property connected to James's business holdings. He claimed the north acreage had likely been purchased with company income and should pass with the operating business. Haley's statement was shorter. She said James always intended his major assets to benefit the blended family equally. Evan read that sentence several times. When $9 was all they thought he had, equality hadn't troubled her. A hearing was set for the following week. The estate also requested a temporary order preventing Evan from selling, leasing, or altering the acreage until ownership was decided. Nolan came to the depot that afternoon. They're asking the court to treat the trust as incomplete, he said. Can they? They can ask. Will the judge agree? The recorded chain says no. The originals say no. Danielle's records say no. But you don't walk into court assuming paper explains itself. I can't afford a long fight. Devin's company still wants an inspection option. That sounds like selling. It isn't. They pay for a limited period to perform due diligence and negotiate first. You keep ownership unless you later accept an offer. Evan called Devin back. They worked out a 90-day option with no right to enter the depot, no transfer of title, and no authority over the trust. Nolan reviewed the property description. A trust attorney he recommended reviewed the rest. The option payment covered Evan's reduced county installment, immediate roof materials, and the legal retainer. It didn't settle the contamination lien. It bought time. The county accepted the agreement 2 days later. Evan was reading the approval beside Bay 1 when the sound of air brakes came from outside. Isaiah had parked 2 buses across the shared road. One sat nose to nose with a building supply truck carrying roofing panels. The other blocked Michael's rear shop entrance. Evan walked onto the loading apron. Isaiah stood beside the first bus with a clipboard. Move them, Evan said. The company is exercising its safety rights. What safety rights? You're bringing commercial deliveries across a disputed access. The road isn't disputed. The depot transfer is. The court hasn't voided anything. The environmental file says the property may be hazardous. The delivery is roofing. Isaiah looked toward the truck driver. You can unload at the street. The The roofing panels were too long to carry safely from Depot Street. Evan had arranged the delivery through the bay so they could be lifted directly to the covered work area. Michael came out of his shop wiping his hands. "You're blocking my tow entrance," he said. "You have a front entrance. Not for the truck on my lift. This is temporary." Michael walked closer. "Then temporarily move." Isaiah held his ground. Evan took photographs of both buses, the road, and the waiting delivery truck. Then he called the trust attorney. Isaiah watched him. He expected shouting. He had come prepared to be the reasonable one, standing beside two company vehicles. Evan stayed on the phone. The attorney sent Martin a written demand and notified the court that Isaiah was interfering with property access before the hearing. Nolan supplied the recorded road agreement, which allowed shared use but not obstruction. 40 minutes later, Martin called Isaiah. Evan couldn't hear the whole conversation. He heard enough. "I understand," Isaiah said. "No, I'm not conceding anything." He ended the call and signaled the drivers. The buses moved. The supply truck entered Bay 1. Isaiah waited until unloading began. "You think one old deed makes you a land developer?" he asked. "No? You think Dad wanted you to sell everything he built? I haven't sold anything. You took money from Acosta for an inspection option. That company will destroy our routes." "How?" "They'll build their own freight operation. They'll take drivers, contracts, and staging space." There was the rest of Isaiah's motive. The North acreage didn't merely represent money he thought should be his. Its position gave Evan influence over a freight project that might compete with Molina Transit. Isaiah had inherited the operating company, expecting to control James's business future. Evan's land meant he didn't. "You could have asked what I planned to do," Evan said. "You don't have a plan. I have time." "That's worse." Isaiah left before the roof of panels were fully unloaded. Haley arrived that evening. She stayed outside, where Michael could see them from his shop. "You called Acosta," Evan said. "I was trying to understand the market. You offered to buy my interest for $150,000. It wasn't a formal offer. You made it to him, not me. I thought we could package the properties." "What properties?" "My office, Isaiah's staging operation, the depot, and the land. You don't own 3 of those. We're family. That didn't make me part owner of your office building." Haley folded her arms. "You were homeless, Evan. You had no money in a condemned building. $150,000 would have changed your life. You knew the parcel was worth more. I knew a developer was interested. That doesn't guarantee value. You didn't ask me. You would have said no, because it came from me. You'll never know." Her face tightened. "Do you understand what happens if you keep all of it? Mom looks like she cheated you. Isaiah looks like he took the wrong asset. I look like I laughed at the person Dad actually protected. That isn't why I'm keeping it. It still happens." Evan looked at her. Haley had spent years reading the room and choosing the safest place inside it. Now the room had changed, and she wanted Evan to move so she could remain where she'd always stood. "You told the court Dad wanted equality," he said. "He did. Then why did he sign a trust naming me? That's what the hearing is for." "No. The hearing is because you don't like his answer." Haley walked back to her car. Before leaving, she lowered the window. "Mom didn't know about the land." "I believe that. She's frightened. I believe that too. Doesn't that matter?" "It matters. It doesn't make the deed hers." The probate courtroom was smaller than Evan expected. No reporters waited outside. No crowd filled the benches. It was a weekday morning in La Grande, and most people in the building were dealing with ordinary losses. Shannon sat between Isaiah and Haley behind Martin's table. Isaiah wore the same dark blue jacket he'd worn at the will reading. Shannon carried a folder against her chest. Haley kept her phone face down. Evan sat with his attorney. Behind him were Danielle, Michael, Nolan, and Devin. The original deed remained inside Nolan's locked case. Martin spoke first. He told the judge that the estate wasn't trying to punish Evan or deprive him of shelter. Shannon closed her eyes briefly at the word shelter. Martin said James's assets had operated together for decades. The buses, depot, routes, office, and land had all been supported by the same family labor. If a secret trust had been properly completed, he said, the estate would respect it. But the circumstances required scrutiny. He emphasized that the papers had been hidden beneath estate property. He said Evan had accepted a condemned building at a nominal value, then recovered documents that might redirect an asset worth millions. That was enough, Martin argued, to pause any private transaction. The judge asked what result the estate wanted. Martin looked at Shannon. She nodded. We asked the court to find that the trust was never properly separated from James Molina's personal and business estate, he said. We asked that the acreage return to probate for distribution under the will, or, alternatively, pass with the operating assets of Molina Transit Lines. Which would place it under Isaiah Harper's control, the judge asked. Yes. And the other beneficiaries support that, Shannon said. I do, Haley said. Yes. Isaiah leaned toward the microphone. The company needs that land protected from a competing freight developer. My stepfather built Molina Transit for the family. He would not have wanted an outsider using his property against it. The judge looked at Evan's side of the room. Evan said nothing. Martin continued. He questioned why James had never mentioned the trust during estate planning. He suggested DBM Holdings might have used depot income. He said Danielle's role created uncertainty because she had once held a financial interest. He questioned whether the original deed had remained legally effective after later business changes. Then Shannon testified. She said James discussed every major family asset with her. She said he never told her Evan owned separate acreage. She admitted withholding the final county notice, though Martin tried to soften the wording. I believed the depot would return to the estate, she said. I believed Isaiah could resolve it. Did you believe Evan would fail to meet the deadline? The judge asked. Shannon looked across the room at him. Yes, she said. And did you want that outcome? Her fingers tightened around the edge of the witness stand. Yes, she had committed fully now. So had Isaiah. So had Haley. They had asked in open court for James's hidden protection to be taken from Evan and placed with the assets they already held. The judge turned to Evan's attorney. I've heard the estate's position, she said. You may present your evidence. Danielle took the stand first. She identified the deed, the trust agreement, and her signature on the DBM Holdings papers. Martin asked whether she had once owned part of the land. Yes, she said. I helped James buy it in 1998. So, you had a financial interest? Until James bought me out. The release is in that folder. Why hide the deed beneath the depot? James had nearly lost his business to a former partner. He wanted one asset protected for Evan. Protected from whom? Anyone who believed being louder made them the owner. Martin stopped there. Michael testified next. He described James closing the inspection pit and doing concrete work in Bay 1. He also described the retirement promise James made in 2020. Was that promise written? Martin asked. Not where I could find it. Then why is it relevant? Because the letter in the safe mentioned it. That proved James put things there he expected Evan to honor. Nolan opened the locked case. He showed the judge the original deed pulled from beneath Bay 1. The recorder's stamp, notarized signatures, legal description, and trust transfer matched the archived county entries. The chain is complete, he said. The 64 acres left DBM Holdings and entered the James Molina Land Trust in 1998. No later document returned it to James personally, his estate, or Molina Transit Lines. Could company income have purchased it? Martin asked. The source of funds doesn't change the recorded conveyance, but the partnership ledger shows James and Danielle provided the purchase funds separately. Nolan placed the ledger beside the deed. Martin looked toward Isaiah. Isaiah stared straight ahead. Devin's testimony took less time. My company independently valued the parcel at just over $4 million, he said. Its position near the planned Route 82 interchange makes it important to a proposed freight hub. Did Evan agree to sell? Martin asked. No. Did he accept money? For a limited inspection option. It conveys no ownership. Finally, Evan's attorney placed James's letter before the judge. Martin objected to using a private letter as a proof of title. The deed proves title, Evan's attorney said. The letter proves intention. The judge read it. Evan looked across the room. Shannon's hands rested motionless in her lap. Haley no longer looked at him. Isaiah watched the deed as if it were a mechanical part he might still remove from the table. Evan's attorney spoke without raising his voice. They mocked a homeless single dad and his $9 bus depot. Under Bay 1 sat his late father's deed. That sounds unlikely until the original document is opened, examined, and matched to a public record created 28 years before this dispute. The judge turned to Martin. Do you have evidence of a later conveyance? No. Another beneficiary? No. Evidence the trust was revoked? No. Then the estate's position depends on the idea that James Molina couldn't have meant what he signed. Martin didn't answer. The judge confirmed the trust and Evan as its sole beneficiary. She ruled that the 64 acres had never belonged to the probate estate. Isaiah's claim to the acreage was denied. Then she made the boundary plain. The fleet business remains with Isaiah Harper. The downtown office remains with Haley Harper. The house and estate accounts remain with Shannon Molina. This ruling takes nothing from them. It confirms that this separate property was never theirs. Outside the courtroom, Isaiah approached Evan. "That freight hub will compete with me," he said. "Then we should write a fair access agreement. You'd still work with me? I'll work beside you. I won't work under you." Isaiah looked toward Michael and Nolan. "You planned all this." "No. Dad planned the trust. You planned the hearing." Isaiah left without offering his hand. Shannon waited near the courthouse doors. "I was wrong," she said. "Yes, I didn't know." "You knew I needed the notice?" She nodded. "I'll bring the rest of your boxes. Leave them at the depot. Can we talk after that?" "Not yet." It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't a locked door either. Evan met Devin at the North Field the following week. Devin placed a full purchase offer on the hood of his vehicle. Evan read the amount and closed the folder. "I'm not selling all of it. What would you consider?" "A long-term lease on the eastern section, plus a freight access easement. I keep the rest. That complicates our layout. It also gives your project the direct approach you said it needed." Devin studied the field. "And the depot. It becomes a small freight terminal, local loads, repairs, and transfers that don't fit your main hub. You want us to use it? I want you to pay fair rates when you do." Devin smiled slightly. "Send me a proposal." The agreement took weeks, but it gave Evan enough to clear the county fees, fund environmental testing, and restore the depot without selling the whole trust. The new soil samples showed limited contamination behind the former tanks. Evan paid for removal and monitoring. Pamela Chen handed him the county's release across the same counter where she had first shown him the $2,000 requirement. "You kept every receipt," she said. "You told me to." I wish everyone listened that well. Michael's retirement promise was settled at the old office desk. Evan placed James's letter between them and handed him a check covering the unpaid amount James had intended. Michael looked at it. "This is too much. It includes the years you waited. I didn't work for you all those years. You kept the place alive long enough for me to find it." Michael folded the check once. "What happens now?" "You become head mechanic. I was already head mechanic. Now you get a contract." Michael read the first page. "And retirement contributions," he said, "written ones. That seems unnecessarily modern. They rebuilt Bay 1 first. New drains carried water away from the slab. The safe remained in the pit wall behind a locked steel panel. They repaired the roof, rewired the office, and replaced the apartment windows. Michael hired 2 mechanics. Evan brought in local freight work and signed a limited transfer agreement with Devin's company. A new sign went above the bays. James Molina Freight Depot. On the morning it reopened, Shannon arrived with the missing boxes from Alder Street. Carol's blue mixing bowl sat on top, wrapped in a towel. Haley came with her, but stayed near the door. "I'm not asking for anything," Haley said. "That's a start," Evan replied. Shannon looked around the repaired waiting room. "Your father would recognize it. He'd complain about what the lights cost." She smiled, then stopped when Evan didn't. "I'm sorry about the apartment," she said. He looked at the boxes. "I believe you're sorry now." It was the most he could give her. She accepted it. Isaiah kept the fleet and routes. Haley kept her tenants. Shannon kept the house. The written road agreement allowed Molina Transit reasonable access and prohibited anyone from blocking Michael's shop or Bay 1 again. Nobody was ruined. They simply had to live inside the boundaries James had drawn and Evan had finally enforced. After the resolution, the depot settled into ordinary work. Trucks arrived, doors rolled open, and coffee went cold beside repair orders. The upstairs apartment had heat, clean windows, and a real address. Evan's daughter had a place there whenever she was with him, not a truck cab or a promise that things would improve soon. If stories about young people rebuilding a life after family betrayal matter to you, subscribe and return for the next inheritance story. At dusk, Evan stood and repaired Bay 1 while the last freight truck pulled away. Light from the apartment windows fell across the clean concrete. His daughter was upstairs, settled for the night, and the old brass key rested on his keyring beside the key to their home.